Good morning, everyone. Um, I guess Colette, I get maybe it isn't pertinent to this meeting, but I'm curious about the how the meeting went with Mordecai people.
So I actually was not there. Aaron and Tanya were. So Aaron would be the best to give you a summary, but from what I heard, it went well.
Yeah, it went well. There's not too much to share. We just went over the process that it would be to nominate the neighborhood, and they kind of tossed around um, ideas about what might be easiest in terms of boundaries with the existing National Register district in that area, and potentially expanding on that now or at a later date. They were just trying to get what the best process would be to try and make sure it's successful. So I think that the next step is for the neighborhood to work on putting together a neighborhood meeting that I guess they'll let us know about, and we can attend to share more information about it.
Was that a request from them
Thanks.
to become part of the historic? Because I know there's a lot of unhappy people as they're tearing down house after house, and so
Yes, this did
Yeah.
come from the neighborhood, and they formed I think it's an 18-person committee to investigate it. And Colette might have more history on this, but I think that there was a similar request from Mordecai a few years back that was not successful. But there was a particular demolition or impending demolition recently that's got a lot of people interested in looking into it again.
yeah, there are a lot of people talking about it because, and so what about like there's so it really requires, I saw whatever. I saw the thing about how do we get the COA more known, and I know Ian, you've talked about letter writing to get people engaged. Like it really can be driven by a community of people who want to preserve some historic property and that maybe has been a more successful way to get people, to get communities to come on, get engaged, get involved in the process and become historic properties. Would you say that, or is that not accurate?
Yes, it's my understanding that historic districts in Raleigh are largely only created through public initiated processes. That is our kind of stance these days. So I don't think by
Yeah.
law that you have to have, 51% of support from the neighborhood to actually designate it, but we don't go out and seek those.
Well, we send letters to individual properties, but maybe that's why I'm raising it, because, if
Right,
you looked at that COA document that we got, maybe a more effective way is to begin to build awareness for the community. I mean, yes, individual properties have to be obviously identified, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but it seems to me that if you have an area like Mordecai, or you have like 5 Points, where there's lots of interesting historic properties that are being torn down to build because the land is valuable, maybe if people want, the way to protect those properties is maybe not to get the owner, but to get the community to acknowledge that there are things that should be preserved within those boundaries. I was just in, I don't know the name of the street, but Lord Berkeley, it's over by the Alamo Theater area. And along there's some super interesting old historic, 50, 60, 80-year-old ranch houses, certainly unique to Raleigh. And they're starting to be torn down to build very big, huge half-acre properties, so 3/4 acre properties. So they're building these big houses on them, which is understandable, but maybe that community isn't aware of being able to preserve some of the history of some of these homes before they disappear. And
We did
kind of a
meet with some members of Longview Gardens.
Is that what it's called? Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, maybe 3 years ago. And I don't think they were able to move forward, but a small portion of the neighborhood was aware and potentially interested.
Yeah, I think they are again. At least that's what I'm hearing. So I'm
What did
wondering if
happen
that
after-
doesn't, I'm sorry?
What do you have to have staff to actually get a neighborhood designated? I know you said you didn't have to have 51%, but what do you have to have?
I think you just
So
need the council.
for local designation, we would need to do a report if one has not been done already. That would be part of the process. That would be the first step because we would need the architectural historians to determine, how much of the neighborhood has integrity. Similar to a landmark that would get sent to the state, they would provide their comments and send it back. And then it would essentially be a rezoning. It would be a city council decision to add the overlay.
Because I know Anderson Heights, it wasn't there was some pushback on that.
Right. So for Anderson Heights, the report was completed, but the neighborhood was not interested in pursuing any kind of historic designation. So we have a report. It identified some potential local landmarks within the neighborhood, and they didn't want to move any further than that. So that's where it was left.
So
See,
we
that's
rely
what
on,
I'm sort of interested in is that, like, okay, so then you said the neighborhood wasn't interested, but I'm sure there were certain people in the neighborhood that were interested. So
Right.
Do they vote on
So
it or what?
it's, I guess, a political will kind of question. Certainly some members of the neighborhood could have tried to move forward, but I don't think it's a written policy, but it has been city council's policy to not designate over owner objection. And in that situation, certainly a huge number of the property owners would have objected and, it just wouldn't have.
Heather
I
sent
asked
us
because-
this.
Sorry, Susan.
Yeah, let me just make this quick point and then I want to hear what you have to say. Sorry. Heather sent us this list of, building awareness for what it means to get, acknowledged and listed as historic properties. And I think if you're going to have those objections, the awareness of that is going to be extremely important. And then my other question, and I'd love it if you'd answer it, is do we rely on the neighbors then to market this? We don't give them any support or we just let them go off and try to convince their neighbors.
Yeah,
Maybe we
in
should-
my past experiences, it has been a neighborhood-led conversation where, we empower them with the tools they need to share the word, and, have them be the ones who are knocking on doors, talking about what it would mean. Certainly, you as committee members and staff will go to neighborhood meetings to help answer questions, but primarily the neighborhood, core team that gets built up, it's the one who's, leading the way and making sure that everyone's aware. I think that we provide, the mailings, we'll send those out for the neighborhood so that they don't have to do it themselves. But other than that, it's primarily very neighborhood focused.
Thank you.
I think that's part of, by the neighborhood taking ownership of, the process, it will help build the support, I think is how we kind of look at it.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
agree,
something
but
it's doing
we-
to them, but something that the
I
neighborhood
think we
has
should
chosen.
review based on what Heather sent us. I think we should review what we're giving neighborhoods to ensure that we're ticking the boxes that could be objectionable. To Ian's point about the Anderson, I think it was Andersonville neighborhood, why did they object? As a research committee, and then make sure the materials we provide help address those objections so that, one-on-one is a lot more work, although respectful of individual homes and land that should be preserved. But neighborhoods, in this city, some of these neighborhoods are stunning. And we're going to lose them fast if we don't start to build some awareness for the importance of certain history. Okay, I'm shutting up, sorry.
That's okay. Well, Ian, did you want to go first? I think you had a comment a couple of minutes ago. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, talk. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that this ties in kind of to the conversation that we were having last week on the executive committee about some community misinformation, like right after that meeting on Friday, I was out and was having a conversation with someone who was a prominent member of the kind of Hayes Barton 5 Points community. And we were talking about the Daniels House situation, and there's, I think, some misinformation among the community about what historic overlay actually entails. Like this person thought that there was no historic designation that would protect against demolition, and therefore, thought that us taking away that designation was just a way to kind of empower the developers to do this demolition, even though they didn't need that to be removed in the first place. And once I had explained that historic overlay does protect against demolition, the whole attitude of the conversation changed. Because, like this person thought that the, historic overlay in 5 Points would mean that the city would be like a HOA type body over the neighborhood with no real protection or benefit to the homeowners. And I think if we can get I'm sure you all are aware, but if we can get that information to the right people in the community, we would have a lot more people on board. I'm curious, in Mordecai, what was the barrier in the past with passing the HOD? Or that's one of the neighborhoods in the city that I'm kind of stunned isn't already a historic overlay district. What's the precedent there?
That was before my time, so I unfortunately do not know. I know that the National Register District has been expanded more than once, I think. And that may have been the result of the last discussion where, they did some research and were able to expand what was there. But other than that, I have no idea.
Well, Colette, that's a really good point too. It would be great if we had somewhere, and maybe this is our responsibility. I know I saw that exchange before about things that aren't our responsibility, and we can vote to do things and create certain responsibilities. Maybe this is one we should, where we actually track our approaches in some, data file, and then track the responses. So if we go back to if a community goes for a district, that's wonderful. But if they don't, then we have the information that was the prevention, and then the next group who comes up doesn't fall into the same trap. So we have, what was done and how it was done, and then we can address it when we approach it the next time. I think that would, sort of what we're talking about, begin to get people to feel like, what Katie was talking about, to feel like there's a benefit to being part of a historic district that isn't tied up in. When I moved here, for example, I was told how annoying it was to be a historic district in Oakwood. I mean, it was endlessly, it was like, oh, it's so vicious. And part of it is the listserv we have here and how it's monitored and stuff. But that's true in, Mordecai too. So I think it's just misinformation. And if we can, as, ambassadors of the historic districts, not be limited in our information, then we probably provide correct information. I mean, I would love to be able to have said to these people, well, this is what we did, this is what we learned, this is what it can help you do going forward. And that would be something to be great, because as we're supposed to be getting these properties on board, I'd love to know why they didn't, and what we can change about the materials we provide to help initiate more historic districts being formed. Is that something
I'm
we
certain
can
that exists. I'm positive that
okay,
there is
good.
documentation. I just have never had a reason to look into it. So
Okay, well, you're the that's really great to know, because I didn't know it existed. So I'm going to add it to my list. I'd like to know.
I'm sure that we have it's in our database.
Yeah, well, that's great. So as we join the commission, one of the things that'd be great to know is how often properties have been reached out to, who were they, and what ones don't fall within that equation. That's a wonderful thing for us to be aware of. So I'll add it here.
I think you're right about the misinformation. I'm positive you're right about the misinformation. I was out photographing 1325 Sycamore before they tore it down and spoke to two residents of the neighborhood. One of them that lived right next to Sycamore, the Sycamore house, and they told me about the committee that was formed to make Mordecai an HOD, and they were just full of misinformation. It was startling. So I informed those two people on, what it meant, what the different versions were. So hopefully I've affected them in a positive way, but I guess we'll see how things turn out.
I've got to
Yeah,
think,
and
I've got to think that the level of success for neighborhoods, seeking to get the historic designation and successfully doing so is almost solely based on the intensity of the group that's in favor of it. For instance, if the neighborhood group is just tenacious enough, I think it has a great chance of happening, following the steps that it takes. But in the end, I think we made this point. The only thing that's required is that the council voted. You could have only one person in the neighborhood want it, and the council want it, and it gets done. It's not you don't take a tally of the neighborhood and go, okay, it's 51% to 49. I guess we're in. I mean, I believe in the end, it's simply the council votes. And in this case, talking about Mordecai, I know one of the people who's involved with the CAC and is involved with that, and I would have complete confidence that she's going to work really hard to get it done. So as far as I could tell, that seems to be the main indicator, is how intense that group is that wants us that wants a historic designation, because they'll get a lot of kickback from folks who I hate to generalize, but I would imagine they're more development-minded folks who see historic designation as a limit to what they can do in the future with their property. I don't know if you guys see it that same way.
yeah, well, I think also there is a crossover between the people who want to preserve the neighborhood and the integrity of their neighborhood, but also have a lot of fear about entering a HOD because they just want to feel like they have autonomy over their property, and they want to feel like they can preserve, the sanctity of their community. And I think both of those things, either, tearing down things and developing them, or this thought of having some extra regulations, or, whatever the word on the street is about what an HOD is. Both of those things are frightening to people. And I think a lot of them are in the same group. So if we did some community re-education, I mean, fortunately, Heather has laid a great social media groundwork for us to be able to reach a lot more people. If we put out some kind of information there, I think that's a good place to start. And maybe we have, but I haven't seen anything like that on our social media. But just to start to lay the framework for people, especially because it's getting a lot of press right now with the Mordecai situation.
Yeah, that's something that we can raise with community awareness. I think that their main goal for the next few months is going to be raising awareness for those that are already subject to COA requirements, in tandem with the COA committee's goals. There's so much that could be done on that committee. We need more people, which thankfully come July, I think we'll have some new volunteers, hopefully. So that's good. But yeah, part of the conversation, Nick and Janine also came to the discussion with the Mordecai committee because of their experience on the COA committee, just to provide an aspect of the commissioner's perspective if needed. And Nick was very clear, this is sort of a contract with your neighbors where you give up a little bit that you wish you didn't have to, but your neighbors also give up a little bit, and it's kind of shared assurances kind of thing. But yeah, we're just getting started, so We haven't heard from them on the neighborhood meeting yet. We'll attend as staff to share the same information we shared with the committee. And I think they were talking about potentially starting off just internally, maybe with a survey within the neighborhood to try and gauge interest and
One of the
maybe
things,
hit some of that misinformation early before the neighborhood meeting happens.
one of the things that I think I read within Heather's document is this idea that we communicate and what we communicate are equally important. So I'm feeling like we need to have some where we can say, this is what we say, because I think times are changing and I think objections are changing. I mean, Raleigh up until probably 5 years ago was a city where if you asked anyone in the council or the mayor, they would have said, well, they really are limited by the city manager and the state assembly, and that nothing can be done without those two bodies engaging and supporting it. And then over the last 5 years, as we've grown so dramatically, so rapidly, and the projections are for even more growth, I think they've come to the understanding that there is accountability at the council level and the mayor level. And that changes the dynamic of how we run our city. I think that's also true of the Raleigh Historic District Commission. I think we need to be looking at how we communicate the importance of preserving history in a more vocal, visible way. It doesn't mean we're always going to win and we're always going to be on the right side of whatever, but I'd like to think we're going to be on the right side of history. And it's just in the short time I've lived here, the changes are palpable. And the places where we've preserved history are the places that are interesting to the community and to the growth of the community. So the conversation with developers, where it's pretty obvious if they tear something down and build something new, it's much cheaper than investing in preserving something and building within those limits. But the idea that they're going to have the potential to continue to grow their business down the road because our city will be more diverse and more interesting and more historic is a really strong argument. And now there's financial support for that argument, where I think in the past that was not traditional argument presented to a very quickly developing community. There is now. And we need to, I think, have that information and communicate that information in a community as well as citywide. And this city, I don't have to tell you all, the news is startling, and the amount of changes that we're seeing and the amount of business that's moving in. And North Carolina is the 10th largest state in the country, and we're the fastest growing city in North Carolina. So I do think we need to begin to, and this might be a whole side, I know everybody's busy and we have a lot going on, but if we don't stop and take the deep breath now, it's Ian, what we were doing with, the African American community, and now I saw you put the LGBT community on, TQ community on. I think we've got to stop and take the breath and think about how do we do this going forward so we don't keep tripping up over the same issues. So I'm just going to, I said that when we talked about the African American community and the one-off publishing of Culture Town, and I think we have to do that now for history. I think Heather raised some really good points, and I know your committee's short-staffed. I know that, we're all short-staffed. I wonder how we wind up on the parts of the commission we wind up on. And I think that we can use our talents more effectively that way too. So it's a list of things, but I take it to try and compile things that I think would help us, and we'll bring it up when we all get together at some point. And Katie has helped me with that. And I think this is a classic example of maybe our communications aren't as effective as they could be. So that's it. Sorry.
Yeah, Susan, I'm curious, what is this document from Heather that you're talking about? Just so I can,
she sent it.
I
It
don't
was
know if I have it
historic.
or not.
Yeah, we all got it. She sent it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, she sent it. It was called, it's from her historic whatever account, her business account, which is maybe why a lot of you guys didn't pay attention to it. But because I've had some exchanges with her, it was the Raleigh Hidden History account. And she sent some initial thoughts of, and I wrote back to her, and she asked us to edit it, but you can't, so don't bother. I wrote to her and said, hey, it's great that you did this document, but I can't edit it. So I wrote back with some thoughts about ways to market history and the historic district commissions. She again proposed letter writing, which,
Yeah, well,
I
I'll
think
clarify, this is an initiative of the Community Awareness Committee to try to do some outreach with homeowners at the request of the COA committee. So the folks involved in both of those committees met yesterday at the Community Awareness Committee to talk through strategies, best ways to reach out to raise awareness for what it means to live in a historic district. And that's a big umbrella. The COA's agenda there is to make sure everybody understands what needs a COA and what doesn't, and what type of COA and what type of district you're in, and just all the things that they're seeing come through the COA committee, where there are homeowners that seem to not know that that was a requirement of them when they bought the house. So talking about strategies to make sure people do know. So that's a large part of what they're working on. But then in terms of what does it mean to live in a historic district, I think she also, in this Google Doc she shared, we're talking about whether we can, point to the pros of being in a historic district beyond, don't forget about your COA as well. So I think that's the section that.
Yeah, that is what she wrote. She wrote things about how do you make historic districts correctly communicate what they're about and the value of them. And she seemed to me the document was driving the concept of let's increase awareness and value for historic districts. And I thought it felt very much like, and good suggestions, but very much suggestions that we've done, like get a list of addressees. We've done that,
We have not, it's my understanding that we used to send out 3 a year newsletter to the historic districts to try and stay in touch with those homeowners and make sure that everybody knew what was going on. And
Right.
that's kind of fallen by the wayside in the last few years, it seems. So this is sort of a two tandem thing. The COA portion is specifically reaching out to homeowners that are doing the work on their houses, and also hopefully looping in realtors in our outreach as well at some point. The people that are responsible for selling and buying the houses and doing the work on houses in the district. And then there's an additional component that we're considering for social media predominantly, rather than a letter campaign or a postcard or an educational session, that is touting the benefits of being in the district and what you
Right.
get out of that, not just what you are required to adhere to for that.
Well, for example, I live in a historic district, and it says there's a state historic tax credit available for rehabbing, which I wasn't aware of, and I rehabbed my house. So I'm assuming that's something that people aren't aware of, and that's something that I saw what she wrote, and I wrote back and said, well, maybe we should tell the people who sell homes this information. So it's a selling point, not that they need more reasons to sell these days, but I feel like her list was a good start. There are 8 points. And the background that you just gave us, Aaron wasn't there, so thank you for providing it. But this is all speaking to kind of the point I'm making, which is we need to think about this more collectively than a one-off. It's not just the COA that's affected by this, it's everything we do. It's getting more historic properties, it's working with neighborhoods. It's kind of a more global communication strategy, which is sort of what I wrote to her. But anyway, just I'm beating that drum on every topic now because I've been here a little bit now, and I hear us repeating the same thing over and over. And I'm thinking we could be doing new cool things if we could just coordinate some of these past things, make it easier for you all on the committee and easier for us, Ian, to get more properties and to find them and to have people reach out to us. So, you know, until somebody tells me to shut up, I'll keep beating that drum. So sorry.
Thanks, Susan. Speaking of more properties, can we move on to the Kittrell house? What do y'all, Erin, did you pull up those pictures?
Aaron, it kicked me off the network, so I can't access the folder unless I restart. So if you are successful,
I'll go grab them.
but I will while she's looking for those. So we heard from a property owner who was previously part of the Anderson Heights neighborhood discussion, and she is interested in essentially landmarking her home. I believe she said that she has already started discussions with, I think it was Preservation North Carolina, about adding easements to her property as well. Her home was included in the report that was done for Anderson Heights, and there was a description provided. I don't know how much in detail you'd like me to go, but it was, and it's 1942 built structure. She says she's done some updates, but has maintained our internal architecture features and provided photos, which Erin will be pulling up. And she also described some of the landscape around the house.
I'm looking at our historic landmarks folder. Is that just for existing landmarks? I see potential in here, but I'm not seeing that 2021 folder.
Look in the research committee folder.
I started there. Hold on, let me get back to it.
So it says her intent is to preserve both the built and natural landscape of the house. I think she says that she's the only remaining house with faux brick coins. But overall regards it as an excellent example of FHA type housing, also known as minimal traditional. And the report did state that an example of FHA type housing should be considered as a local landmark due to their rapidly disappearing status. Any luck, Erin? If not, we can just pull up the street view.
I'm running a search right now in the research folder, so I'll let you know what I find. But yeah, I don't have the street address in front of me, so Google might be a good start.
The IMAPs, the tax record photo actually might be a little bit better than Google. I looked on Google and it wasn't that good, but there is a recent street view that's pretty, or tax record photo that's pretty good.
All right, can you guys see that?
Yeah. I seem to remember someone on, I think it was White Oak. It was a Craftsman home, or I mean, kit home, and they were seeking designation, and we denied it because they had painted it. Am I correct in any of those statements?
It
Do you
does sound,
remember that?
I believe that was I think that the objection there was because it was a kit home
Mhm.
and part of its character. It also had a major addition in the back. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yeah.
So that was part of the only remaining original character, I think, is where that hesitancy came from. I think that we also instructed them to do more research, possibly, and then we never heard back from them.
I asked because this is obviously painted brick. It looks like it was painted sometime in the early 2000s, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's from what, the 96 round.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious how much that affects our decision, or if we can just decide any.
I'd say that's up to you guys. I know that she said, I think that she'll be reaching out to the consultants to do additional research on her property. But it would be, I think it's up to you all to determine how much weight you want to put on that.
Yeah.
I guess, Ian, why painting the bricks is a problem? Because they're old bricks and they're not, it's not as clear if they're painted? I mean, why is that a problem?
I think it's generally frowned upon. You can't undo it. It's pretty much done once you do it. The owners of Montfort Hall tried to remove the paint from the exterior of that house, and it was a massive failure. So it's generally looked down upon just because you can't undo it. The house wasn't originally painted, so it's never going to be original again. Would you agree with that, Colette, Aaron?
That's the general idea. I'd say it's up to you all whether that means, the entire house is not worth designating at that point. It sounds like we have some history of feeling that way. But for an example, like if an existing house in a historic district wanted to paint their historic brick, it would be a major work and the COA committee would have to approve it. And they don't approve it very often.
I think what you should weigh here is is the house type rare enough or potentially in danger enough that designating it is more valuable than not, is what you should consider here. I mean, certainly painting the brick does result in a loss of the integrity, but overall, does it retain enough integrity to be considered a good example of this house type?
Yeah, for me, I feel like the brick painting it is sad that they did that and it can't be undone. But I think that this isn't the same situation as the white oak kit home. That one was pretty heavily modified with the addition in the rear plus the painting on the exterior. With this home, though, I would like to hear more about the historic context of the home. Like, we do have this, you know, she said that FHA style was what this is hinging on now, but if she's engaging someone to do additional research, I'd like to know more about who lived in the home, if there's some significance there, or how it was part of the larger neighborhood, rather than just being architecturally distinct from the rest of the neighborhood as it stands now.
There is some, one of the early owners is significant. His name was David Griffiths, and he was one half of Powell and Griffiths grocery stores in Raleigh, which were very popular for over 20 years. So there is an early owner that's somewhat important to the history of the Five Points area, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with you, Katie. I think this is more about if it's gone, would it be a bigger loss than the fact that the brick is painted? And I think that's a really, really important point to consider. But that history is really interesting. And if she does the research, or the homeowner does the research, we may uncover more reasons why this is valuable to be maintained.
I'm not sure that I looked at this house and I thought, is this really a typical example of an FHA house? It doesn't look like one to me. It looks a little bit more fanciful than what I consider to be an FHA house, which is you know those little cottages in Georgetown and my neighborhood. Did that cross either one of your minds or anyone's? It just looks too nice.
Well, it looks like a house that was next door to me in Chicago suburb that was an FHA home. So it might be, you know, different prototypes in different areas, and in Raleigh,
Yeah.
they didn't do that, but they did some, I mean, there's half a dozen houses exactly like this where I used
Yeah.
to live in the Chicago area. So I thought it was typical FHA house. When I saw it, I didn't even really have the explanation. I was like, oh, that's so cute.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
oh, go ahead.
you go ahead, Kay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess would like to know to what extent we would want it to typify an FHA house in order for it to qualify as a good example based on the rest of the neighborhood. You know, if this is the only one of that style left, and you know, we mentioned this neighborhood in our conversations earlier about HODs. If we want to, you know, it might be a good point of traction if we did want to pursue that at some point, or, you know, getting more folks in the neighborhood to feel like it's accessible. Just another point. But if this is the only house of that type in the neighborhood left, or one of the only ones with, or the one with the most integrity, I think that's worth considering.
It may be the only one left with an owner that's willing to landmark. I doubt that it's the only one left in the neighborhood. So where do we go from here? We're recommending to the owner of the house whether she pursue this or not. Is that where we are?
Yeah, that's where we are. I haven't reread the Anderson Heights report in a while, but that may be useful to help make your decision if you take a look through that and see, you know, if there's anything in there that, you know, leads you into feeling one way or another.
Okay.
Just send us a
I'd
copy
like
of
to
that.
go read through that. And,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd read
and-
through it if I got it. Yeah, I'd accept it.
If you get a
Yeah,
chance
I-
to, y'all drive through the neighborhood, just look around. We don't need to make a decision right now, do we?
No, I don't think so. We can definitely let the property owner know that you're going to take some time to do some research and then, give a recommendation.
Okay. Okay, the rest of the stuff on the agenda is pretty much just status updates, so I will call on staff to give us those updates. Where are we on Culture Town?
Tanya is the keeper of most of the knowledge on these.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, she did say that she did receive digital copies of Culture Town, or that additional scanning is in progress. So that is moving forward.
Colette, would you mind taking down your screen?
Yes. And I think that is all, that's the most recent update as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, same. I'm not aware of any additional work on those projects last week either. Though it's possible there was some email communication.
I was
For
telling Ian the other day
LGBT
that I got a
Oops.
copy.
Sorry, Caleb, what was that? Nice.
Yeah, I ordered a copy the other day from Amazon, so I felt really fortunate.
I
to
hope
have
that you
one.
didn't spend the like $140 they wanted on it.
I don't think so, but it's
Okay,
quite
good.
possible. I often just go crazy on Amazon. I'm not even sure what I ordered, how much it was, but maybe it was $50 or 45 or something like that.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a great book. Susan, next time you're walking by, I'll run out and hand it to you because I think you'd really enjoy it. It's
Oh, thanks, Kelly.
topic we've been discussing in detail, and it's very, very interesting. Talks about several of the African American neighborhoods in Raleigh. It's very, very cool.
Thank you. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I brought the office copy home and have maybe 60 pages in now, but it's really interesting.
On a different topic, I wanted to bring up, I have a question about a pending rezoning of 115 and 119 North Boylan Avenue. I didn't know if we wanted to comment on that as a commission at some point. I was actually trying to move into 115 North Boylan until I learned of the rezoning situation. But I think both of those structures are 1905 homes, and they are moving to remove the NCOD on them and demolish them to make room for like a 7-story office building. And they're both owned by the same person. One of the homes is a dental office. I don't know if we wanted to comment on that at some point, or if that was even anything with the NCOD that we could speak on. I don't think that there's any other protection on the homes, but want to bring that to this group.
So we provided staff comment on that particular rezoning. I did note the potential historic nature of those properties. I think one of them was identified by the state and is a survey only property. But typically, just even though it is a historic property due to age, it is not a designated historic property in any way. So if it's outside of a National Register district or local historic district or landmark, we do not bring it to you all for comment. But if you wanted to bring it up at a at the executive meeting, to ask the executive board if you'd like, if it could be added to the agenda, that would be a potential way for you to see if anyone wants to comment on it.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, it might be just totally futile to even bring it up or make it, have everyone go through a conversation about the rezoning and providing comments on it. It seems like there's neighborhood support for the demolition of those buildings. But I was, taken aback. I was just not, I'm sad to say where to go. And if other folks are on board and want to talk about it, but I can bring it up at the executive meeting instead, if that's a better place.
That'd be good. Thank you. Can you tell me those addresses again?
Yeah, it's 115 and 119 North Boylan Avenue.
If I remember correctly, I think it also includes the properties on whatever street is south of there, which also were, I think, potential 100-year-old properties that it was.
Yeah, I think that's Lane Street down there, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. Yeah, those two homes in particular were the ones that I saw cited, but I think, yeah, it might be a larger area.
115 or 119?
Yes.
Gosh. That's a beautiful house.
It is, and there are some long-term residents in there as well. When I was talking to the property manager, there are some people who've lived in there for like 15 or 20 years or something, and they're going to be displaced.
Man. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Katie.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, well, if
We did hear last week from another property owner who is interested in landmarking. It is for 1322 Mordecai Drive. And the property owner is going to start reaching out to architectural historians, but it's a Whitehall, a Sears Whitehall. It's one of the kit homes that was identified.
so how would that be affected if Mordecai does become an HOD?
Well, it is possible to have a landmark within a historic overlay district. That is pretty common in Oakwood. There are a few, there's one in Boylan Heights. So you wouldn't have, it would be the same amount of review. You wouldn't have anything additional unless you requested additional interior designation for the landmark. But I guess it would depend on who submitted what first. Certainly I think doing an individual property is going to be a little bit quicker than, getting the whole neighborhood on board. But I think that this one in particular has been on the potential landmark list for a while as a result of the Kit Homes report that was done a few years ago.
So did they respond to us because of the letters we sent out, or did we didn't send out a letter to that one, did we?
Well, yeah, I don't think that we did. I think it was just coincidence that I actually think it potentially came as a result of the demolition nearby. But I can't guarantee that.
You said it was
And just-
1322?
1322. Mm-hmm.
And just the conversations that are now in the community about preserve. An example of building awareness can help people come to us, because getting to people is a lot harder. But identifying the areas that need to be preserved and making awareness in those areas might be the next thing we should be doing instead of other aspects. Anyway, just the fact that people are starting to come to us because they're aware of it, Mordecai, says a lot to me.
And I think at yesterday's council meeting, the joint public hearing was set for the Thompson, Jones, Anderson, Allen house. And I think that is September 7th. I think is what it was. It was in September. Remember that.
I do think it's somewhere right in there. That's my birthday, so I feel like I would remember if it was that specific date, but yeah, it was early September.
You know, I'm working on this project at the Dorothea Dix Park. And we walked around the historic buildings because we're installing a sculpture with housing pollinators at the park. And the topic wasn't history, but as I walked around, I was thinking over and over and over again. And I know Nick has been pushing to be part of it. Those buildings really can make a huge difference in the park. And as a research committee, I'm wondering if we can do anything related to helping our commission be more engaged. I know Nick is working with a woman on the committee, but it feels like it'll be a huge loss if those buildings wind up coming down.
So the RHDC does have a Dix Park ad hoc committee that we have met a few times this year just to try and monitor what's going on with the progression of the park. And we met with a parks planner at one of those meetings who's responsible for helping implement the master plan. So one thing you could do to start just getting familiar with the project, I would say, is review the master plan document, because that's the direction that the city has decided this is the end product we're going for. And now we're in the implementation process through several different phases. So we have let the parks planners and those involved with the design review know that we're here and available through that committee avenue. If they need us, I know there was discussion about a interpretive history walk behind one of the buildings that's being restored as a part of the first phase of the park, and then ongoing conversations about expanding that interpretation throughout the park. It looks like a lot of buildings are planned to be retained. Some are going to go away, and that's to be expected with as many buildings as are on that campus. But yeah, Susan, definitely start with that document. And there's some really good graphics that show kind of what the existing park looks like and what the plans are.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with the document, and I was in your ad hoc committee. So as you walk around the park, what comes, I'm not arguing with the buildings they're tearing down or not tearing down, but the history of what's there and how to preserve it. I know they're interested in that, and I don't want to see it fall by the wayside and us, look back in 5 years and say, "Oops, we should have done," because a historic walk around that park would be really interesting. I know at that meeting we were talking about volunteers to do that. I hadn't heard anything more from it. So I'm just raising it to this committee because our job is to identify places that could be historic districts, or, maybe this would be really crazy, but the whole park is I don't know. But I think we need to think different. And I know they've worked really hard on the plans, and I've seen them because we're implementing our sculpture relating to those plans. Anyway, probably not a topic for today, but something certainly not to lose sight of.
So there is a portion of the park already designated as a National Register district, but potentially moving that up to a landmark or mini historic district on its own. I don't know how successful that conversation would be.
I don't even, their cemetery is probably the place you're talking about because it's amazing, and they're going to identify the graves. There's a lot of people who were buried there who there's no identification, and I know that's an effort they're going to do. So that might be where you're talking about.
Yeah, the cemetery is under the management of the Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board that I'm on. It's one of the 4 in Raleigh that we manage or work on. So
Anything else?
I don't think we have anything else for today.
Okay. Well, look into that. Look into the Anderson Heights report, everyone, and yeah, maybe we can revisit this next month and have some guidance for the owner of this house. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Great.
Nick.
Thanks, Ian.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Have a good day.
Yep.